Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're shifting gears a bit. We're moving beyond just what makes a great job interview answer
Mm-hmm.
and diving really deep into the tiny linguistic choices, the
Hmm.
grammar that turns a good answer into something, well, strategically persuasive.
Yeah, exactly.
Picture this. You've
Yeah.
got the content down pat. You know your experience, your skills, but have you actually mastered the architecture, the grammatical structure that holds it all up?
That's really the heart of it, isn't it? We often focus on, the big vocabulary, the buzzwords.
Right.
But the real persuasive muscle, especially in these high-stakes communication jobs, it often comes down to how you deliberately use syntax, tense, clause structure. Things like, why use a conditional type 3 sentence when a simple past tense might seem easier? How does that choice completely change the impact?
Absolutely. And that's precisely our mission today. We're going to break down this really fascinating set of source materials. We have six highly effective interview answers that come from a candidate, actually a former lawyer who's making a pivot, moving into a communication-heavy call center role.
And these answers are brilliant, not necessarily because of the career change itself, but because of their structural precision. The language is just so carefully built.
So this is going to be a purely linguistic deep dive. We're treating these answers less like simple responses and more like, I don't know, architectural blueprints of thought.
That's a great way to put it.
Our job, and what we want to do for you, the listener, is dissect every single highlighted grammatical structure. We need to understand its specific persuasive job. Why this tense? Why that clause? Why this exact word order? What effect were they aiming for? And per the request that prompted this, we are going to explain every single rule in detail. We won't skip anything. The focus is intensely on why it was said this way.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's treat the language like sophisticated engineering. The listener gave us these answers with grammar highlights, so we're going to assume every choice, even a comma, was intentional. This isn't just about being correct. It's about control. Linguistic control.
And what's really illuminating, I think, is how the candidate's grammar choices actually mirror the professional values they're trying to project.
Hmm.
Structure, clarity, precision.
That's spot on. When they use, say, a really precise, complex subordinate clause, they're not just talking about process discipline. They're demonstrating it in the very way they speak. The delivery proves the point.
Okay, so let's start where the candidate starts, with that first potentially tricky question, the one that really sets the tone for the whole interview.
Right. Question 1. Why did you leave law to work in a call center? This is designed basically to put the candidate on the back foot, make them defensive.
Yeah, it's a narrative landmine. The strategic goal is huge here. They have to take this potentially negative thing, leaving a prestigious field, and spin it. Turn it into a positive story of, discovery and logical redirection.
And they grab control immediately, right out of the gate. They use one of the most powerful tools for narrative control in English grammar, the conditional type 3.
Oh.
The exact structure they use is, if I hadn't spent several years in law, I might never have discovered the complexity of direct communication.
Okay, let's really spend some time on that rule. Because its strategic power, as you say, it feels immense. How exactly does conditional type 3 work, and what's the psychological effect it has right here?
Okay, so conditional type 3, it's the grammar of the unreal past. The formula is pretty fixed. You have if plus past perfect.
Okay, if I hadn't spent.
Right, and that's followed by the consequence, which uses a structure like modal verb, might, would, could, plus have, plus past participle.
Might never have discovered. Got it.
And critically, what it does is describe a hypothetical situation in the past that did not actually happen. That's the if part. And its unreal, impossible consequence. That's the main clause.
But the key here, the framing, is that the candidate did spend several years in law. That's the reality. So they're using this structure to talk about the opposite, the reality they avoided by doing the thing.
Precisely. That's the genius of it. By phrasing it, if I hadn't spent, they are implicitly framing that time in law not as, a detour or a mistake.
Right, not something they regret.
Exactly, but as a necessary, unavoidable step, a precondition for their current realization. The grammar itself forces the logic. If A, spending time in law, hadn't happened, then B, discovering the passion for communication would never have occurred.
Wow. So the grammar itself makes it sound almost like fate, or at least a logical sequence. It strips away any sense of regret or failure from leaving law.
It absolutely does. Think about a weaker answer, something like, well, I realized law wasn't for me, so I decided to try this. That simple past tense, I realized, I decided, it implies a reaction. maybe even a recognition of failure.
Yeah, it sounds like they just quit.
Right. But the conditional type 3, it reframes the whole narrative. Law wasn't a mistake they moved away from. It was a critical learning phase that moved them towards their true calling. It linguistically absolves them of regret because the past action is positioned as essential, foundational. It's incredibly sophisticated narrative control just through that one grammatical choice. We have to explain why they chose this. To establish the past as necessary, not regrettable.
That structural control of the past narrative is
Yeah.
masterful.
Okay, so they've set the past right. Now, moving forward in the answer, they need to connect that past experience smoothly to their current drive. And they do this by pairing two key tenses, the past continuous and the present perfect. We see the past continuous first. It sets the scene, the background. While I was handling complex cases, I realized that my real passion has always been communication. See, that was handling.
Yeah.
The past continuous focuses purely on the ongoing process of their old job. It paints a picture of continuous involved activity. It sets up this detailed backdrop.
Which makes the realization the next verb I realized, which is simple past sound like it wasn't just a random thought. It sounds like a moment of clarity that actually emerged from doing the work.
That's exactly the function. The ongoing nature implied by was handling gives weight to the context. It subtly suggests, look, during this extended period of intense professional activity, this objective truth became clear to me. It creates a logical bridge from the old work to the new insight.
And then right after that, they define their core identity using the present perfect. My real passion has always been communication. Why that tense? Why not just say, my passion is communication?
Good question. Because the simple present, my passion is, could suggest something current, maybe even temporary, a feeling right now. Okay.
But the present perfect, especially with that has always been, connects a state that started way back in the past directly to this present moment. It suggests a deep-seated, enduring quality, an identity that exists outside of this specific job change. The reason for this tense is to show enduring identity.
So the present perfect use here validates the whole career shift. It basically tells the interviewer, look, this passion isn't some new whim. It's been a constant thread throughout my life, and I'm just now aligning my job with it. It certifies the authenticity of the move.
A tiny tense change, but strategically.
Huge.
It completely shifts the perception of their motivation.
Then they transition, but they don't just jump. They show balanced thinking using a contrast word, although, and some pretty sophisticated nominalization, the sentences. Although law trained me to think strategically, the call center industry allows me to apply those same skills.
Right. That use of the subordinating conjunction, although, is a classic rhetorical move. It's called concession.
Concession. Okay. By immediately acknowledging the value of the old job first, saying, in effect, yes, law was valuable, it trained me. They show they're intellectually honest. They don't sound dismissive of their past.
So they kind of head off the interviewer's potential objection, like, why throw away that training?
Precisely. They neutralize it before it's even fully formed. This builds credibility. It says, I see the value in my past, and now I'm choosing to refocus those valuable skills. The purpose of although here is strategic concession.
And what about the nominalization? We see it in phrases like decision-making patterns or effective communication popping up. What's the function of turning verbs like decide or communicate into these formal nouns?
Okay, nominalization. Turning actions or descriptions into abstract nouns. So instead of saying, we decide things well, you say effective decision-making. It serves a couple of key functions in an interview. First, it just sounds more formal, more authoritative, maybe even a bit academic.
Yeah, it elevates it, makes it sound like a field of expertise, not just something you do.
Exactly right. It signals precision, mastery. And second, by making the concepts abstract, it elevates the skills themselves. They're not just talking about talking to people, they're talking about mastering effective communication as a formal analytical process. The purpose of nominalization here is to sound authoritative and to elevate the skill. This formality helps legitimize the career pivot. It shows their analytical lawyer brain is fully transferable.
And then, to really anchor this whole answer, they define the value of the new role using a relative clause. The foundation of every business, effective communication and problem solving under pressure.
That relative clause, the part that gives essential info about the noun before it, foundation, lets them elevate the call center job itself. By framing its core skills, communication, problem solving, as the literal foundation of all business.
Wow, yeah.
They're not just taking a new job, they're strategically repositioning themselves at the very core of commerce. The grammar itself elevates the status of the career change. The purpose of this relative clause is definition and elevation.
So that first answer wasn't just descriptive. It was a full-on strategic narrative. Using grammar point by point to control the past, certify the present motivation, and elevate the future role. That level of precision, that's exactly what we need to keep tracking.
Okay, moving to question 2. Tell me about yourself. Classic opener. The candidate's goal here seems to be establishing a core identity. Methodical, calm, results-driven, someone reliable, basically, no matter the industry.
And they kick it off by defining themselves using a really interesting combination. A relative clause working together with the present perfect passive. I describe myself as someone who has always been driven by structure and clarity.
Let's break down that key phrase, who has always been driven. Okay, the who part is the relative clause defining someone. But the verb structure inside is packed with strategy. It's passive voice, plus it uses that present perfect idea again. Why passive here?
Right, instead of active like I always seek structure.
Exactly. If they said, I always seek structure, the focus is on their action, their choice. But using the passive has always been driven. It emphasizes that structure and clarity aren't just things they do. They're portrayed as constant, almost external forces that shape their professional identity.
Like it's fundamental to who they are, not just a preference.
Precisely. It implies this core value is non-negotiable, foundational, part of their professional DNA. The purpose of the passive here is to externalize and essentialize the driving force.
And the has always been part adds that layer of continuity again, right?
Yes.
Suggesting this isn't new, it's core to their character over time.
Absolutely. It assures the interviewer consistency is baked in. And they carry this through, reinforcing their past legitimacy, again using the passive voice when talking about their old duties. In my former role, I was responsible for analyzing unclear situations and synthesizing complex information.
Wait, okay, so the actor I is clear. Why use the passive I was responsible for analyzing instead of the active I analyzed? What's the strategic gain there?
It adds weight, formality, scope. By emphasizing the duty assigned to them, the scope of responsibility within that high-stakes legal context, rather than just listing their personal actions. I analyze this, I synthesize that. It elevates the professionalism of the past role.
Okay, I see.
And crucially, the purpose is to linguistically transfer that weight, that legitimacy, directly to the new job. They're saying, look, I handled significant responsibilities there, and I bring that same scale, that same discipline here. The focus stays on the task, the organizational function, not just them doing stuff.
That's subtle, but really effective for maintaining that sense of prestige during a career change. But the thing that really makes this identity statement stick, I think, is a rule of 3. Enforced with that tight parallel structure, they lay out their process. Listen carefully, identify the root issue, and create a clear solution.
Oh yeah, this is pure rhetorical grammar. Beautifully done. Parallel structure means using the exact same grammatical form for items in a list. Here, it's 3 infinitive verbs. Listen, identify, create, presented like decisive, actionable commands.
Why is that so much more persuasive than if they'd mixed it up? Like, I listened, then I identified the issue, and creating a solution.
Because breaking parallelism makes the listener's brain work harder. It disrupts the flow, the rhythm. It loses that sense of reliability. But the perfect parallel structure, it creates rhetorical force, it's memorable, it establishes this powerful rhythm, professionalism.
It sounds like a formula.
Exactly. When the interviewer hears those 3 perfectly aligned steps, it sounds like a reliable protocol, like a standard operating procedure the candidate follows every single time. The purpose of parallelism here is to assure consistency and discipline. It sounds like a guaranteed method.
It's the linguistic shortcut to proving competence, basically. Sounds incredibly decisive. Okay, moving into question 3. What are your biggest strengths? The goal here, obviously, is to list strengths clearly, but also, crucially, to link that legal training, the analytical side, directly to what a call center needs. Things like de-escalation, analysis under pressure, discipline.
And notice the opening. They immediately use modal verbs for strategic softening. I'd say my main strengths could be summarized in 3 areas.
Let's look at that deliberate choice.
Yeah.
Would, and I'd, and could. Why not just state flatly, my main strengths are? What's the purpose of softening it?
Well, using, I'd say, the contraction of I would say gently frames the whole statement as maybe an opinion or a suggestion, not an absolute unarguable fact. It injects a little professional humility, right away.
Okay.
Then following it with strengths could be summarized reinforces that. It introduces this possible slightly humble framing.
So they're being confident, but they're wrapping it in politeness,
Ah,
professionalism.
exactly. The combination strategically softens the self-praise. And in a communication role, right, being able to project confidence without sounding arrogant or boastful is key. The purpose of these modals, would and could, is to manage that tone, making the assertion palatable while maintaining that measured professional image.
And structurally, they keep up that discipline. They use a simple numbered list, first, second, third. That parallelism, again, reinforcing the very strength they're claiming process discipline.
It's a nice thematic loop, isn't it? Describing structure while using structured language. But let's dig into how they define that discipline, especially in the third point, where they use a complex condition to emphasize foresight. Since I used to handle detailed documentation, I know that skipping a single step might cause a chain of issues.
That conditional part is interesting. Skipping a single step. It's like a nominalized action acting as the condition, followed by the modal might cause. Why is this phrasing better than just saying, I'm disciplined because I don't skip steps?
Because this phrasing highlights foresight, preventative thinking. By using the structure, the reason, since I used to, leading to the knowledge, I know that, of a potential negative outcome, skipping might cause. They aren't just saying they are disciplined, they're demonstrating they understand the cost of not being disciplined. The purpose of might here is crucial. It points to a potential but serious consequence.
They're projecting risk management, showing they think ahead.
Precisely. They're leveraging that high-stakes legal background to make the consequence sound really credible, really serious. It elevates the strength. It's not just personal tidiness, it's calculated risk mitigation. The purpose of this complex condition is to frame discipline as strategic foresight.
And then finally, they connect their main strength, staying calm, directly to its benefit.
Yeah.
Using that well-placed relative clause, I can stay calm even when the situation seems intense, which helps me separate emotion from logic.
Right. The relative clause, starting with which, acts like a little logical connector. Its purpose is to seamlessly link the action, staying calm, to its direct high-value strategic result, separating emotion from logic. This proves self-awareness. They're not just saying, I'm calm. They're saying, I'm calm, and here's the valuable analytical outcome of that calmness.
They're offering not just the strength, but the predictable positive result of the strength, showing the why it matters.
Exactly. Showing the methodology behind the mastery.
All right, now for the classic tough one. Question 4. What's your biggest weakness? The strategic tightrope here is huge. You need to present a genuine weakness, ideally one rooted in something positive like precision, and then crucially, show concrete, measurable steps you've taken to fix it.
And they tackle this immediately by controlling the timeline, explicitly putting the weakness in the past using used to plus base verb. I'd say my biggest weakness used to be overanalysis.
That phrase used to be. That's the key linguistic flag, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's its precise function here?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. Its purpose is to explicitly mark the weakness as a past habit, a state that's already been addressed or managed. It signals straight away to the interviewer, okay, this problem, it's not a current operational risk. It's a legacy issue I recognized, and I'm actively fixing.
So it minimizes the current danger of the weakness,
Yeah.
reassures the interviewer.
Exactly. It frames the candidate as self-aware and proactive, not currently flawed. That past framing is essential setup for the pivot, which they signal with a strong contrast word. However, I've realized that in fast-paced environments.
However, the big narrative turn signal.
Right. Its purpose is to be the linguistic bridge. It shifts the focus instantly from the problem, overanalysis, to the solution and the insight gained, moving the spotlight from deficit to progress. And they follow this turn with a very neat use of comparatives. It's more practical to make a well-informed decision quickly than a flawless decision too late.
That more X than Y structure feels very deliberate, rhetorical almost, defining the new balance they've learned.
It is. Its purpose is to define their new operating philosophy. They're setting up a clear, prioritized framework. They aren't claiming they're perfect now, that would sound fake. Instead, they're prioritizing speed and effectiveness over impossible perfection.
Which demonstrates good judgment, adaptability, especially for the fast pace of a call center. Turns the lawyerly flaw into a practical strength almost.
Precisely. And to really nail down that progress, they use the present perfect again. I can honestly say I've improved significantly in balancing precision with speed.
And present perfect here. I've improved.
Because its purpose is to emphasize the result of all that past effort, landing it squarely in the present. It tells the interviewer the improvement is real, it's measurable, and it's relevant right now. It connects the past self-correction directly to their current state of competence. It seals the deal on the weakness is managed narrative.
And they wrap this up by linking that ongoing self-correction to a specific metric, using a structure that kind of functions like a participle clause in concept. So I've been training myself to act once I have about 80% of the information I need to proceed.
Yeah, it's not a textbook participle clause, but functionally it links that continuous action to a condition. Notice the present perfect continuous. I've been training myself. The purpose of that tense is to stress the sustained, ongoing effort. They're still working on it, still refining.
Shows commitment to improvement.
Right. And this ongoing effort is linked directly to a clear, almost scientific-sounding metric, 80%.
That number makes the whole solution sound less vague, more
Yeah.
empirical, planned.
It really does. It shifts the solution from just, I try to be faster, to a disciplined, professional threshold. The complexity of the sentence linking the continuous training to the decision point mirrors the sophistication of the self-management strategy itself. The purpose of this whole closing structure is to demonstrate self-control through syntactical control, backed by a clear metric.
Okay, now we get into the real trenches. High-stakes application with question 5. How do you handle an angry customer using bad language? This needs a structured answer. Needs empathy, but also control. A clear procedure.
And interestingly, the candidate starts their procedure not by describing what they do, but by justifying what they don't do, using the conditional type 2. This is a really smart strategic opening. If I were to interrupt them too early, the tension would probably increase and I would miss key information.
Okay, let's really drill down into this conditional type 2 rule. We've got if plus simple past, technically subjunctive, were here, if I were to interrupt, followed by modal plus base verb, tension would probably increase. Why use this structure, which talks about unreal or hypothetical present-future stuff? Why not just say, I won't interrupt them? What's the strategic purpose?
Because this demonstrates strategic foresight. It's masterful planning, really. The purpose of using the unreal conditional type 2 here is to show they've already mentally mapped out the negative consequences of potential wrong moves. By saying, if I were to do X, Y would happen, they're basically telling the interviewer, I've run the simulations, I know what not to do and why. It frames that initial phase, letting the customer vent not as just passive waiting, but as calculated risk management. It's based on pre-analyzed negative outcomes.
So it proves their process isn't just reactive, it's pre-planned, determined by avoiding known pitfalls.
Exactly, and the rest of the answer is completely underpinned by that process discipline, enforced by the very precise use of sequencing words whenever, if, once, and when.
These are like the grammatical signposts for the de-escalation steps.
They are. They function as triggers for each stage in the sequence, whenever they get emotional, if I were to interrupt, once they finish, when they confirm. The purpose of this meticulous sequencing is to reassure the interviewer that the candidate has a reliable, predictable system. It's non-negotiable. It works regardless of the customer's emotional state. The grammar itself conveys procedural reliability.
Now, the actual moment of de-escalation, it seems to hinge on a linguistic technique, shifting from the customer's raw emotional language to neutral, analyzed language. Using reported speech, paraphrasing. Once they finish, I paraphrase their main concern using calm, neutral language, something like, let me make sure I understood correctly, you're upset because...
The strategic power of this is huge. Its purpose is to force a cognitive shift. The candidate takes the customer's unprocessed, hot data and filters it, processes it into objective, cool language. This act of summarizing, of reporting back, it fundamentally changes the dynamic.
How so?
It shifts the customer from just being an aggressor venting emotion to being a participant who is asked to validate an analysis. It brings them into a more rational space.
And notice the focus in that paraphrase bit.
Yeah.
You're upset because it feels like there's a deliberate passive focus there.
Yes, focusing on the passive state, you're upset, is really crucial. The purpose is to maintain both neutrality and empathy. They focus on the state of being upset and the reason for it.
Rather than on the customer's actions, like shouting or swearing.
Exactly. It removes judgment from the interaction.
Yeah.
It maintains the professional boundary, but it also validates the customer's underlying emotion, I hear you're upset, without actually condoning the bad behavior. It's a very fine line, an empathetic control mechanism.
And finally, control needs to be fully reestablished if the behavior persists. They use modal verbs again to set clear, firm, but polite boundaries.
Oh.
I would politely but firmly remind them of company policy regarding abusive language.
Using would here is key. Its purpose is to signal a fixed professional procedure for a potential future event. This isn't a personal, emotional reaction. If they swear, I will tell them off. It's standard operating procedure.
Right.
The would assures the employer that boundaries will be maintained consistently as policy dictates. It maintains control without sounding aggressive or reactive. It's the language of reliable procedure.
Okay, we've made it to the final hurdle. Question 6. Do you have any questions for us? This isn't just downtime. It's one last chance for strategic inquiry to show long-term thinking, commitment, and alignment.
And the candidate immediately signals awareness of this formality by using elevated modal politeness. If I may ask, and could you tell me?
Why is this level of politeness so important right at the end? What's the purpose?
It's all about situational awareness. They're now asking for the interviewer's time, their expertise, using may, which asks for permission, and could, the polite request form. It reduces the sense of imposition.
Makes it less demanding.
Exactly. The increased formality respects the interviewer's position and demonstrates professionalism right to the very end. The purpose is linguistic respect. It's like saying, I value your time and your seniority.
And the substance of the questions themselves. They're structured using indirect questions and embedded clauses, which shows, again, that complex control over syntax. Examples like, could you tell me which performance indicator matters most? And I'd like to know how your top performers usually develop their skills over time.
Right. Contrast those with direct questions. What's the most important indicator? Or how do top performers develop? Direct questions use inverted structure, sound more abrupt, maybe even demanding. By using indirect questions, embedding the question inside a statement or a polite request, the structure stays like a normal sentence. It sounds less aggressive, more conversational, more controlled. The purpose of indirect questions here is to soften the inquiry and maintain finality.
And that embedded part, the specific detail like how your top performers usually develop, that functions as the object of the main verb, like tell me about this complex thing.
And that syntactical control is crucial. The purpose of showing they can handle these embedded clauses smoothly is to demonstrate they can manage complex ideas. They can subordinate one concept within another. They're not just asking about one simple thing. They're interested in the structured historical pattern of success. The complexity of the grammar mirrors the depth of their professional thinking.
The whole line of questioning definitely projects a strong future orientation, doesn't it? Focusing on things like over time and wanting to know about growth and continuous learning.
That's a huge signal. Its purpose is to communicate long-term commitment by asking about growth, development. They're subtly telling the interviewer, hey, I'm thinking about being here long-term, mastering this, growing with the company. It projects ambition beyond just getting the job. It shifts the perception from maybe this is just a stopgap to this could be a committed career move.
And they finish with a really strong move. Compound questions. Combining the challenge the team faces and how the candidate could potentially help. What's the biggest challenge your team is currently facing, and how could someone in my position help overcome it?
That is the ultimate closing gambit. Its purpose is to instantly transform the question from just curiosity, what are your problems, into proactive problem solving. How can I be part of the solution?
Yeah, it puts them right in the team.
It forces the interviewer to actually visualize the candidate already contributing, already collaborating from day one. It ends the entire interview on this dynamic note of potential, of alignment. The candidate isn't just asking questions, they're mentally joining the team and offering value. Hashtag outro.
So, after breaking all that down, what does this intense linguistic analysis really mean? For you, the listener, when you put all these pieces together, well, the effective use of grammar in these answers, it's not just about being correct, it's actually a fundamental form of process discipline in itself.
Absolutely. The structure of the language consistently reinforce the content of the answers. By deliberately deploying complex, controlled grammar, from those conditionals to the present perfect, from parallel structure to subtle modal verbs and embedded clauses, the candidate wasn't just talking about being analytical and structured, they were demonstrating it live, proving their capacity to structure complex information under pressure, which is exactly the skill needed for de-escalation, for analysis, for clear communication. The grammar itself becomes the proof of concept.
So for you, our deep dive listener, really getting a handle on these specific grammatical strategies offers some immediate actionable tools, things you can use in your own communication, your own professional framing.
Definitely. First, you absolutely need to get fluent with conditionals. Master Type 3 for that retrospective analysis, looking back at the past that didn't happen to justify where you are now. And Master Type 2 for projecting into the future, planning hypotheticals, like how you'd handle a challenge. The purpose of mastering conditionals is demonstrating both reflection and foresight.
Second takeaway. Harness the power of the present perfect and its continuous forms. Use it strategically to link past experiences smoothly to your present ambitions and the progress you've made. The purpose is to ensure no part of your history seems wasted or irrelevant. Use that, has always been, phrasing to really certify your core identity.
And third, consistently use parallel structure and carefully chosen modal verbs. The purpose of parallelism is to establish instant authority, clarity, and decisiveness in your lists or steps. And the purpose of modals like would and could is to inject that necessary professional humility, ensuring your confident statements land politely. The structure of your sentences needs to mirror the discipline you claim to have.
By really mastering these strategic grammatical choices, you move beyond just, communicating correctly. You start communicating persuasively, strategically. You actively shape your message. Transform it from just reciting facts into a controlled narrative designed to hit a specific goal.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with, building on all this analysis. We focus a lot on how grammatical precision builds credibility, describes problem solving, maintains control. Now, flip that. Consider how quickly a fundamental breakdown in grammar, a misplaced clause, a confused tense, maybe an unclear passive sentence, could instantly shatter that professional image, or worse, actively escalate tension with someone who's already upset. The precision of language, it's not just a nice to have. In high-stakes communication, it's an essential tool. It's critical for maintaining clarity, credibility, and control, especially when things get chaotic.
Answering correctly really does start with speaking accurately and strategically. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the grammar of persuasion. We'll see you next time.